Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a question that might just reshape how you view childhood in the 21st century. What if the very tools designed to connect us are actually making us more isolated, more anxious, and, well, maybe less equipped for real life?
Yeah, that's a really powerful question. It gets right to the heart of what this source material we're looking at explores. This deep dive is all about uncovering a profound and frankly unexpectedly rapid shift in how childhood works now, and the consequences for mental health, which are often kind of hidden.
Right. And the core argument coming out of these sources is pretty striking. It suggests this huge surge we've seen in anxiety, depression, self-harm among young people, particularly after 2010. Well, it's not just random. It seems to be largely down to this double whammy, being overprotected in the real world, but at the same time really underprotected in the virtual one.
That's exactly it. The sources actually frame the period roughly 2010 to 2015 as the Great Rewiring, a really pivotal time. It was this fundamental, very fast switch to what they call a phone-based childhood, and it just completely changed how kids grow up. We're still figuring out the full impact.
Okay, let's really dig into that phrase, the surge of suffering, because the data you mentioned, it's quite stark, isn't it? We're seeing this really sudden, significant jump in major depressive episodes, specifically U.S. adolescents, ages 12 to 17, kicking off right around 2012.
Yeah, and it wasn't small. Depression became roughly 2.5 times more common, and it cut across all races, all social classes. That's important.
Wow. Okay.
But what really stands out in the data is how it hit differently across genders. Both boys and girls saw increases, sure, but girls experienced a much, much larger jump in absolute terms for depression, and really alarmingly for emergency room visits related to self-harm, especially in that 10 to 14 age group.
10 to 14, that's young.
It is. And anxiety rates also climbed significantly, again, with the biggest jumps for girls and also for LGBTQ teens. So the insight really is that this isn't some uniform way of hitting everyone equally. It's hitting certain groups much harder.
Okay, so when something this big happens, you naturally look for causes, right? People often point to things like, 9/11, the wars, the 2008 crash, maybe climate change. But the sources seem to push back on those being the main drivers.
They do. And it's a really key distinction they make. The timing just doesn't quite line up. Think about it. Those major events mostly impacted millennials when they were teens, 9/11, the financial crisis. But their rates of mental illness didn't spike in the same way afterwards. Not like Gen Z's did, starting around 2012.
Interesting.
And the sources argue that historically, collective threats often bring people together. They can increase social cohesion, give a sense of shared purpose, which can actually buffer against depression. Real depression, the kind linked to isolation and lack of purpose, that tends to rise when people feel disconnected alone.
And this isn't just a U.S. thing either, right? That strengthens the case for some kind of common factor.
Exactly. The sources point out that the same patterns, this rise in psychological distress, showed up in Nordic countries, the UK, Canada, other Anglosphere nations, right around the same time. Things like feeling alienated at school, that started rising across the Western world after 2012. It was remarkably synchronized.
So that points towards what? A shared catalyst?
It strongly suggests one. And the biggest one identified in the material is the smartphone. Its widespread adoption, specifically. I mean, the iPhone came out in 2007, yeah, but the real shift for teenagers happened a bit later. Like in 2011, something like 77% of U.S. teens had a phone, but only 23% had a smartphone.
Ah, okay. So most social media back then was probably on a family computer. Less private, harder to access constantly.
Precisely. It wasn't in their pocket 24/7. Then you get front-facing cameras becoming standard around 2010. And Facebook buys Instagram in 2012. Suddenly, image-based social sharing just explodes. You're not just sending messages anymore. You're posting these carefully curated pictures of your life, often to a huge audience, constantly open to judgment. That's a totally different ballgame for social interaction.
Which brings us to this really key distinction the sources draw. The real world versus the virtual world. How do they define those?
They define them based on core characteristics. So the real world is, embodied. We're physically there, using our bodies, picking up on subtle cues, body language, tone. Interactions are synchronous, happening in real time with that natural back and forth. Communication is usually one-to-one or maybe one to a few. It tends to build deeper connections.
And communities in the real world, they often have higher stakes for joining or leaving.
Exactly. A high bar for entry and exit, as the sources put it. That encourages commitment, working through problems, relationship repair. You can't just block your family member easily, usually.
Okay, so then the virtual world.
It's largely disembodied. You don't need your physical body in the same way. Interactions are heavily asynchronous. Think text messages, posts, comments. You can respond hours later or have multiple conversations at once. Communication is often one-to-many, like broadcasting. And crucially, virtual communities tend to have a very low bar for entry and exit. Easy to join, easy to block, easy to just leave. Relationships can feel more disposable.
Though the lines can blur, right? Like we use FaceTime with family that's virtual tech for real relationships. Or those 18th century scientists writing letters. That was a kind of virtual thing too.
Absolutely. Good examples.
Yeah.
But the core idea the sources emphasize is the level of commitment required. Real-world interactions, even those mediated by older tech-like letters, often demanded more effort, more commitment to maintain. The modern virtual world drastically lowers that threshold.
Got it. And this shift ties into how human childhood itself works, according to the sources. This idea of an apprenticeship.
Yes, exactly. Human childhood is unique. It's described as this extended apprenticeship for cultural learning. No other animal does it quite like us. Our brains take a really long time to fully develop. They hit about 90% adult size by age 5, but then there's this massive period of pruning and refining connections. This long development is specifically adapted for soaking up incredibly complex cultural knowledge and social skills from the environment.
And a huge part of that soaking up is play.
Absolutely central. The sources call it the work of childhood. It's not just about fun, though it is fun. It's essential for wiring the brain for things like problem solving, managing emotions, learning how to negotiate, take turns, all those fundamental social skills.
They use this analogy, right, about babies and iPads.
Yeah, it's a powerful one. Imagine giving infants iPads with really engaging movies about walking. But the movies are so captivating that the kids never actually get down on the floor and practice walking. They miss the struggle, the trial and error, the actual physical experience needed to develop the skill. Engaging screens, the sources argue, can essentially block or displace those crucial real-world experiences needed for healthy development.
So free play, the kind kids do just for the fun of it, that really took a nosedive, especially after 2009.
It did. And what replaced it increasingly was social media, which isn't really play in the same sense. It's often quite strategic, managing your image, presenting yourself, constantly comparing yourself to others. The data shows a clear drop in just unstructured time hanging out with friends during the exact years when teens switched from basic phones to smartphones. That is the great rewiring happening right there, a generation shifting its social life indoors, online.
And this shift, it allows these platforms to sort of hijack our natural learning processes.
That's the argument. Take attunement, for example. Healthy development relies on serve and return interactions. Think of a baby babbling and a parent responding. It's like a game of conversational tennis. It needs precise timing, back and forth, to build deep connection. But asynchronous social media, with its delays and lack of real-time cues, really inhibits that deep attunement. It contributes to that feeling of loneliness many heavy users report, even when they're technically connected to hundreds of people.
It sounds almost like the platforms are designed not to foster that kind of connection.
Well, their design exploits other human tendencies very effectively. The sources talk about two key biases: conformist bias and prestige bias. Social media acts like the most efficient conformity engine ever invented. Think about it. In real life, figuring out social norms takes time, observation, feedback. Online, a kid can scroll through hundreds, thousands of posts in an hour, each with likes, comments, instant data on what's popular, what's cool, what gets approval. It can shape their idea of acceptable behavior incredibly quickly, far faster than, say, parental guidance.
Okay, and prestige bias. How does that fit in?
We're wired to look up to and imitate people who seem successful or prestigious. That's how we learn skills. But platforms kind of hack this. They quantify prestige with followers, likes, views, things that don't necessarily correlate with actual skill or positive values. Sean Parker, an early Facebook guy, even admitted they aimed to exploit a vulnerability in human psychology, creating a social validation feedback loop. This pushes kids to copy influencers of questionable value, whose online fame might have zero connection to real-world competence or positive contribution.
Right. So it's not just that kids are online, but when they get online, that's critical. This idea of sensitive periods in brain development.
Absolutely crucial. Brain development is experience expectant. There are these critical or sensitive periods where the brain is highly plastic and literally expects certain kinds of input to wire itself correctly, like Konrad Lorenz's goslings imprinting on his boots. That happened during a specific window. If they missed it, they wouldn't imprint properly.
So if kids are getting their first smartphone around age 11, which is common, They're diving headfirst into this complex, often adult virtual world right during that sensitive period for learning social and cultural norms, ages, say, 9 to 15.
Exactly. And the consequence is profound. Their sense of identity, how they regulate emotions, what they learn about relationships, it all gets fundamentally shaped by the online environment, by the algorithms, by the likes and comments. Instead of learning primarily through nuanced real-world interactions, they're learning from thousands of posts, curated images, and online feedback loops. Any kid spending that sensitive period heavily immersed in social media will be, as the sources put it, deeply and indelibly shaped by the cultures of those platforms.
Wow. Okay, this paints a picture of that double-edged sword you mentioned. Overprotected in reality, underprotected online. The sources talk about discover mode versus defend mode. Can you unpack that?
Sure. It's a core concept. We have these basic behavioral systems. The behavioral activation system, or discover mode, kicks in when we see opportunities like finding ripe fruit. You feel positive, curious, eager to explore. Then there's the behavioral inhibition system, or defend mode, that activates with threats hearing a predator nearby. Your appetite shrinks, you get hypervigilant, focused on safety, escape. Chronic anxiety, essentially, is defend mode stuck in the on position, constantly scanning for threats, even minor ones.
And how does overprotection relate to this, the tree analogy?
Right, the young tree needing wind. It's a great illustration of anti-fragility. Our psychological immune system, like our physical one, needs exposure to small stressors to get stronger. If you shield a tree from all wind, it grows weak roots. If you shield kids from all challenges, all minor risks, all potential failures, they don't develop resilience. They become more fragile, less able to cope when real adversity hits. They become, in a sense, anti-fragile, weakened by the absence of challenge.
And this ties into the decline of risky play. Kids need some risk.
They actively seek it out. It's how they learn their limits, develop competence, and overcome fear. The sources stress that minor injuries and play scrapes, bruises, should be seen as a feature, not a bug of childhood. Mariana Brusoni, a play researcher cited, notes that while parents understandably want zero risk, the developmental harm from eliminating all manageable risks is actually far greater in the long run.
So those old metal spinners on playgrounds, the ones that felt a bit dangerous but weren't likely to cause serious harm, they were actually good for development.
Potentially, yes. They offered real feedback, a chance to test limits. Compare that to many modern playgrounds, which are sometimes described as anti-fragile resistant. So safe, they offer almost no opportunity for kids to push boundaries or experience that thrill of mastering a small risk. The goal shouldn't be as safe as possible, but as safe as necessary, allowing for that crucial developmental experience.
And this mindset links to shifts in parenting styles, too.
Definitely. The data shows U.S. mothers, for instance, started spending significantly more time actively parenting after the mid-90s. There was a big shift towards what's called concerted cultivation, very hands-on, lots of scheduled activities, heavy supervision. This contrasted with the more traditional natural growth parenting, which allowed for more independence and unstructured time. And interestingly, this intensive style spread even to working-class families who hadn't traditionally parented that way.
You mentioned Frank Sciarretti's paranoid parenting. This fear factor seems key.
It was huge. Fueled partly by 247 news cycles highlighting rare dangers, a generalized fear took hold. By the early 2000s, unsupervised kids just started vanishing from public spaces. It got to the point where neighbors might call the police on parents letting their kids play outside alone. It was a massive cultural shift.
And this concept of safety itself expanded. Concept creep.
Yeah, Nick Haslam's term, safety, morphed from mainly physical safety to include emotional safety, which is important, of course, but it's sometimes led to what the sources call safetyism. That's where safety becomes the absolute highest value, overriding almost everything else, even if the threat is minimal, like hurt feelings or differing opinions. The New Yorker cartoon nailed it. We've created a safe, non-judgmental environment that will leave your child ill-prepared for real life. There's a real tension there.
So how does this safetyism impact kids' development, their internal resilience?
It connects back to attachment theory. A secure base, a reliable parent or caregiver is crucial, but that base is supposed to be a launch pad for exploration, for adventures off base. Those independent adventures are vital for learning and building confidence. Overprotective parenting, even with the best intentions, can keep kids tethered to the base. It makes it harder for them to internalize that sense of security and learn to face challenges on their own. They stay stuck in defend mode, needing constant external reassurance.
Okay, so given this whole backdrop, the great rewiring, the shift from real to virtual, Overprotection meets underprotection. What are the specific harms identified? The sources list 4 foundational ones, starting with social deprivation.
Yes, and the numbers are quite striking. The percentage of U.S. 12th graders saying they met up with friends almost every day dropped significantly after 2009. And the actual time spent face-to-face with friends by 15 to 24-year-olds also declined, especially after 2013, even before COVID hit. It's a measurable loss of real-world social connection.
And you can feel that, right? That quote from the Canadian student.
Yeah, describing Gen Z as incredibly isolated with shallow friendships. She talked about walking into a lecture hall and finding everyone just silently staring at their phones, almost afraid to talk to each other. That isolation, she felt, weakened their sense of self, their confidence. It's a powerful observation.
Okay, second harm, sleep deprivation.
Another sharp trend. After 2010, many more U.S. students in 8th, 10th, and 12th grades started getting less than 7 hours of sleep. And the link to screen time, especially social media use late at night, is pretty well established. Studies show it disrupts sleep patterns, and experiments where kids cut back on evening screens show immediate improvements in sleep duration and attention.
Makes sense. Third harm, attention fragmentation.
This one feels intuitive to many of us. The constant buzz, the notifications, the easy switching between apps. It directly interferes with developing sustained focus and self-control, those key executive functions. Heavy smartphone and video game use consistently correlates with poorer outcomes, academically and otherwise. And often, the sources suggest this is partly because users are battling some level of addiction.
Which leads straight to the fourth harm, addiction itself.
Right. The sources use Thorndike's idea of wearing smooth a path in the brain. Those repetitive touchscreen motions become ingrained habits. Dopamine is key here, but not in the way people often think. It's less about pleasure or liking and more about wanting or craving. It drives the urge for more. That's why things like slot machines or social media notifications are so compelling.
So these apps are deliberately designed, like slot machines, in a way, to keep us hooked.
Very much so. They use models like the hooked framework trigger, action, variable reward, investment, every trick to maximize engagement and keep you coming back. Frances Haugen's Facebook files confirm this, revealing internal knowledge at Facebook about how their platform was designed to hook teens, even knowing the potential mental health harms.
And when heavy users are separated from their devices, the withdrawal symptoms, they sound like chemical addiction.
They're remarkably similar, according to the observations cited. Anxiety, irritability, trouble sleeping, just a general feeling of unease or dysphoria. It suggests a real physiological dependence for some users.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly and look at how these harms play out differently based on gender. Why does social media seem to hit girls harder?
The evidence is pretty consistent. Correlational studies find heavy social media users, especially girls, have much higher rates of depression, sometimes 2 or 3 times higher. And importantly, experimental studies where usage is reduced show mental health improves, suggesting a causal link, not just a correlation.
And the sources break down the reasons. First one is about appearance.
Yes, appearance contingent self-worth. With front-facing cameras everywhere and platforms like Instagram built around images, girls face constant judgment based on looks. Often highly curated, unrealistic looks. Olivia Rodrigo's song Jealousy, Jealousy is mentioned as capturing that feeling of comparing yourself to these perfect online images.
That must do a number on your self-esteem.
Absolutely. It can cause what the sources call their sociometers, those internal gauges of social standing, to just plummet. It fuels anxiety, inadequacy. There's a chilling example given of TikTok algorithms pushing extreme dieting content, like the corpse brag diet, to young teenage girls after they showed even slight interest in weight loss. And Alexa Spence's story, her personal struggle with Instagram's pressures, really drives home how intense that internal battle can be.
Okay, reason number 2, relational aggression.
Right. While boys might lean towards physical aggression, girls often engage in relational aggression, gossip, exclusion, damaging reputations. Cyberbullying rates soared for girls. And the awful thing is, with anonymous profiles and phones always on, the bullies are inescapable. They follow you home, into your bedroom.
Third reason has to do with emotion spreading.
Yeah. Research suggests negative emotions like depression are actually more contagious than positive ones within social networks, and they tend to spread more readily from women. This might relate to phenomena like sociogenic illness, where symptoms seem to spread socially. There have been recent clusters of Tourette-like tics, or even dissociative identity disorder symptoms apparently linked to TikTok videos.
And the fourth reason is predation and exploitation.
Unfortunately, yes. The internet makes it easier for predators to contact girls. And there's also pressure within peer groups, often from male classmates, for girls to share nude photos, which sadly sometimes get treated like social currency.
So the overall irony here is,
The deep irony is that the more time girls spend immersed in these platforms, supposedly connecting, the more lonely and depressed many of them report feeling. The data showing loneliness spiking sharply for girls right as social media took off in the early 2010s is just heartbreaking.
okay, so if that's the picture for girls, what about boys? The sources suggest a push-pull dynamic. What's pushing them out of the real world?
The push factors suggest the real world might feel less welcoming or rewarding for boys than it used to. Safetyism, as we discussed, likely curtailed rough and tumble and risky play more for boys. Structurally, the economy values physical strength less. Schools often favor skills where girls tend to excel earlier, like sitting still and verbal fluency. And there's been a decline in male role models in schools, like fewer male teachers.
So the real world feels less appealing. What's the pull into the virtual world?
The digital realm, right from arcade games through to smartphones, offered boys activities that strongly appeal to their drive for agency, mastery, and competition. Exploring virtual worlds, mastering game mechanics, competing, engaging in simulated combat, these provide a sense of competence and engagement that might feel lacking elsewhere.
It sounds like a retreat almost. You mentioned hikikomori in Japan. Are we seeing echoes of that extreme withdrawal here?
The sources suggest we are. They describe young men, like the example Luca, who find the online world just vivid enough to stave off deep boredom or loneliness. Unlike previous generations who might have been pushed by boredom into real-world activities, today's immersive digital worlds offer a constant, readily available alternative, enabling prolonged withdrawal.
And this corresponds with boys taking fewer physical risks, too.
Dramatically fewer. Hospital admissions for accidental injuries among adolescent boys fell sharply after 2012. Their injury rates are now closer to those of girls or even older men. It suggests a major shift away from physically adventurous activities. And we have to mention pornography. The internet provides unprecedented access to hardcore content. Daily use among Swedish senior high school boys, for instance, more than doubled between 2004 and 2014. Heavy porn use can, for some, replace the effort and vulnerability of real-world dating, offering easy gratification that can hinder the development of healthy romantic relationships.
And video games. Obviously huge for many boys.
Huge, yes. The impact is complex, it's not all negative. But rates of internet gaming disorder are substantially higher in males. Estimates suggest maybe 7%, like 1 in 13 teen boys, experience significant real-world problems because of excessive gaming.
But even for those not clinically addicted, there's an opportunity cost.
A massive one. That's a key point. Hours spent gaming are hours not spent sleeping enough, getting exercise, hanging out with friends face-to-face, doing homework, or interacting with family. The source mentions a young man regretfully saying he wished he'd spent more time with his grandfather instead of always gaming. That really hits home.
So putting the push and pull together, what are the consequences for boys?
It seems linked to the failure to launch phenomenon. More young men struggling with education, employment, or training. And interestingly, their mental health profile is shifting. More internalizing disorders like anxiety and depression, which were historically more prevalent in girls. It raises echoes of Durkheim's concept of anomie or normlessness. When traditional social structures weaken and the virtual world offers a compelling but disconnected alternative, people can feel lost, adrift, anxious.
Okay, the deep dive also touches on something beyond mental health stats, with the sources from spiritual degradation, this idea of a vertical dimension.
Yes, the divinity dimension. It's the idea that human experience isn't just horizontal, day-to-day stuff. There's a vertical aspect where morally beautiful actions lift us up, spiritual elevation, and repulsive actions pull us down, degradation. The argument is that a phone-based life, by its very nature, tends to pull us downward. It impacts our ability for deep thought, focus, genuine empathy, building close relationships, things often associated with spiritual well-being.
And the sources contrast this with ancient wisdom traditions. 6 practices are highlighted. First, sacred time and space.
Right. Religions often create sacred times like Sabbaths, holidays, and sacred places, temples, churches that foster collective experience and rhythm. The virtual world. It's described as an undifferentiated blur. It's always on, entirely profane in the sense of non-sacred. There's no shared rhythm, everyone's on their own schedule. It loses that collective dimension.
Second practice, embodiment. Rituals often involve moving together, physically kneeling, singing, dancing.
Exactly. That synchronous movement builds trust and communion. The virtual world is largely disembodied. We forget our bodies. Most online activities are asynchronous, solo. Compare that to playing on a sports team where coordinated movement builds incredible bonds. The virtual world struggles to replicate that.
Third, stillness, silence, focus, like meditation training the mind.
Yes, training to overcome the jumping monkey mind. A phone-based life does the opposite. Constant notifications, endless scrolling. It fragments attention. It trains us to fill every micro moment with external input, making stillness and focus incredibly difficult, actively hindering that path towards inner quiet or self-transcendence.
Which is the fourth practice,
Yeah.
self-transcendence, moving beyond the self.
Yet social media is almost perfectly designed to activate the opposite. The brain's default mode network, which is all about self-referential thought, social comparison, worrying about what others think. It keeps us locked in the self, making it harder to achieve that sense of perspective or connection to something larger. And it's interesting, ancient traditions warned against bedevilments like obsession with self, glory, gain, loss. The sources bluntly call social media a fountain of bedevilments, training us in materialism, judgment, envy, pettiness.
Okay, fifth practice, less judgment, more forgiveness.
Religions consistently push for compassion, forgiveness. Social media, however, it seems to thrive on constant evaluation, judgment, outrage, comparison. It often amplifies the negative, making compassion harder.
And sixth, awe in nature.
Nature is presented as a universal pathway to awe, that feeling of encountering something vast and amazing that makes your own concerns feel smaller. It's linked to spirituality and well-being. It's an antidote to anxiety and self-focus. The sources mention students taking all walks without phones and suddenly noticing the beauty in a simple park, things they'd completely ignored while scrolling.
So pulling all that together, the contrast between ancient wisdom and modern digital life is pretty stark.
It is. If we are what we think, as thinkers from Buddha to Marcus Aurelius suggested, then constantly bathing our minds in algorithm-chosen, often trivial or agitating content is bound to shape us. The call to action from the sources is clear. We have to consciously take back control of our inputs, reclaim our attention, and by doing so, reclaim agency over our lives.
That's a heavy message. And it's easy to feel like, well, the genie's out of the bottle, it's too late. But the sources argue against that kind of fatalism.
Strongly argue against it. They point out that societies do make major changes when safety is clearly compromised. Think about recalling dangerous products like toys with lead paint, or how drastically safety regulations for ships changed after the Titanic. When the harm becomes undeniable and widely understood, collective action is possible. We're not powerless.
But individual action feels really hard here,
Yeah.
especially for parents. Why is that?
It's a perfect example of a collective action problem. Parents feel enormous peer pressure. Alexis Spence's story again. Everyone else has one, I'll be left out. This pushes parents to give in, even if they have reservations. It creates this unfortunate equilibrium, as the sources call it, where the default becomes the smartphone and the old play-based childhood just evaporates because no single family can easily opt out alone.
And tech companies are stuck in their own version of this problem.
A race to the bottom, essentially. They're competing fiercely for our attention, which incentivizes using every psychological trick, autoplay, infinite scroll, gamification like Snapchat streaks to keep us hooked. Even if they know it might be harmful, the competitive pressure makes it hard for any single company to unilaterally adopt less addictive designs. Tristan Harris has talked a lot about this. And there's another collective action problem around unsupervised play. Parents might want to give their kids more freedom, but they fear being judged or even reported for neglect under vague laws. So everyone ends up being overly cautious, leading to collective overprotection.
Okay, so if individual action is tough, what about systemic change? The sources propose 4 big reforms. The whales, what are they?
They're designed to be foundational shifts. 1, no smartphones before high school around age 14. Just delay that constant personal internet access. 2, no social media before 16. Protect kids during that really vulnerable early puberty phase from the intense pressures of these platforms.
Okay, those are big. What are the other 2?
3, phone-free schools. Meaning phones are put away lockers, pouches, whatever for the entire school day, not just in class. Give kids back their focus and their ability to interact face-to-face. And 4, far more unsupervised play and childhood independence. Let kids roam, figure things out, resolve their own conflicts, build those crucial real-world skills and resilience.
And the argument is these could make a real difference, quickly, and without huge costs.
That's the claim. Potentially substantial improvements within a couple of years if adopted widely. And it's urgent, they argue, because the next wave of tech AI, spatial computing, the metaverse promises even more immersive, potentially addictive virtual experiences. We need to establish healthier norms now.
So breaking that down further,
Yeah.
what can governments and tech companies do realistically right now?
Governments can establish a clear duty of care for tech companies towards minors. Laws like the UK's Age-Appropriate Design Code, which California has adopted, are a start. Things like COSA, Kids Online Safety Act, aim in this direction. They could also raise the age of internet adulthood in laws like COPA from 13 to 16. That aligns better with other milestones like driving and covers that critical sensitive period for social media harm. Roughly 11-13 for girls, 14-15 for boys.
And tackling that fear around neglect laws.
Yes, governments need to clarify and narrow those laws. Protect parents who allow reasonable independence, like letting a 9-year-old walk to a nearby park. Prevent cases like Deborah Harrell's. Plus, governments can invest in designing public spaces for children, safe sidewalks, bike lanes, traffic calming, parks easily accessible without needing a car. And supporting vocational training, apprenticeships, especially for boys, is highlighted as vital for the transition to adulthood.
And tech companies. Beyond just complying with laws.
Their biggest potential contribution, according to the sources, is facilitating reliable age verification. Not necessarily government IDs for everything, but creating robust systems where parents can easily designate a device as belonging to a minor. This could automatically restrict access to adult content or platforms based on age without constantly hassling adults or creating huge privacy risks. That would empower parents enormously.
Okay, let's turn to schools. What are their two whales?
Phone-free schools and playful environments. For phone-free, the key is a whole-day ban. Phones locked away. Mountain Middle School is a great example cited. They went phone-free in 2012. Head of school said it changed the whole vibe from zombie apocalypse back to kids actually talking to each other.
But parents worry about emergencies.
The counter-argument is that schools are full of adults with phones. In a real emergency, do you want kids glued to their own devices, potentially spreading rumors or panic, or listening to trained adults giving instructions? A phone-free environment might actually be safer.
Okay, so if phones are out, what comes in? Playful schools.
Exactly. More unstructured free play. Kevin Steinhardt's Play Club example showed rapid gains in social-emotional skills just by letting kids play freely. There's also the Let Grow project homework assignments encouraging independence, like running an errand alone. It helps kids build confidence and overcome fear of failure.
And more recess, riskier playgrounds.
Definitely. More time for recess and bringing back things like loose parts, tires, planks, crates that let kids build, create, and take calculated risks. Sweden's no rules recess example is fascinating. It led to fewer injuries and less bullying, more happiness. Nature play is also crucial, getting kids outside counteracts anxiety and digital isolation. And finally, actively trying to re-engage boys, perhaps by hiring more male teachers as role models is suggested. All this points towards needing large-scale experiments, the sources argue. Test these policies properly.
Okay, last piece. What can parents do starting today? Beyond collective action.
The big thing is a mindset shift. Adopt Alison Gopnik's gardener model, not the carpenter. Focus on creating a nurturing environment where kids can flourish unpredictably, rather than trying to shape them into a specific, perfect product. Accept the messiness.
And practically, for different age groups, young kids, 0-5.
Prioritize real-world interaction above all else. Limit screens drastically, maybe not at all until closer to school age. Their brains need the rich input of the physical world.
Elementary and middle school, say 6-13.
Focus hard on building independence. Encourage walking or biking places. Give them real chores. Let them have sleepovers, but maybe collect the phones at bedtime. Try camping. Look for device-free summer camps. Manage screens carefully. Use filters. Set time limits. And crucially, delay social media until at least 16. Let them get through early puberty first. Watch for signs of addiction, anxiety, irritability when off devices, and be ready to do a digital detox if needed.
And for teenagers, 14-17.
Keep pushing independence and responsibility. Public transport, driving lessons, part-time jobs, connecting them with other adult mentors. Help them find third places to hang out independently with friends, library, community center, park. Consider wilderness programs or gap years for real self-reliance building. And talk to them about how social media works, its potential harms. Use resources like the Center for Humane Technologies Toolkit. One final caution: resist the urge to constantly track them via their phones. It can undermine their growing sense of autonomy.
So wrapping this all up, our deep dive aimed to unpack this massive shift in childhood. the great rewiring, driven by phones and overprotection, leading to this mental health crisis.
Yeah, and looking forward, it's a bit sobering. AI, spatial computing, these technologies promise even deeper immersion, potentially even more addictive experiences. The sources warn about limbic capitalism, an economy increasingly designed to exploit our basic drives and keep us hooked. If we don't correct course now, it could get much worse.
But that ancient wisdom keeps coming back. We are what we think. Or, as Marcus Aurelius said, your soul takes on the color of your thoughts. If we don't consciously choose our inputs, reclaim our attention, we risk filling our lives, maybe that God-shaped hole some talk about, with things that are ultimately trivial or worse, degrading.
Which brings it back to you, the listener. You're not alone in worrying about this. Connect with other parents. Check out
Mhm.
organizations like Let Grow, Outside Play, Fair Play, Center for Humane Technology, Screen Strong. They're working on this.
Start conversations in your own community, your school, with other parents. The sources really emphasize that collective action is key here. If groups of parents agree to delay smartphones, delay social media together, it makes it so much easier for everyone. It makes choosing real-world community, choosing a healthier childhood, a viable option again. Let's work together to bring childhood back down to earth.